All right, folks, Rambam, we're in the laws of vows, chapter 7. Let's get into it. When a person issues a financial claim against a colleague, which would require the latter to pay were he to admit liability, right? Yaakov says, or Reuben says that Shimon owes him $100. And if he were to say, oh, yeah, I owe, then you have to pay it, right? And the colleague denies the obligation, but he denies it, Shimon, and takes an oath, or the plaintiff administers an oath to him, whether he took it himself or the plaintiff administers the oath, to him, and he denies any obligation. He took the oath. I don't owe him $100. If he is lying, the defendant is liable for the oath concerning shvuas hapikodei. So there are 4 different types of oaths that we're speaking about. And this is a new one that we haven't discussed. In previous ones, we spoke about an oath of expression, an oath taking in vain, right? That's what we learned previously. Now we're learning about a pikadon. A pikadon means an object or something that is in the hands of someone else that belongs, right? That this is in the hands of Shimon, that he's holding on to this golden silver goblet, or to the money that was lent to him, right? In other words, it belongs to someone else, but it's in the hands of second party, right? That's what the pikadon means, right? Of an entrusted object. Yeah. Okay, the above applies even if the defendant does not respond to Amen. With regard to Shavuos, because the one is liable, whether he took the oath on his own initiative or the other person administered the oath to him, and he denied any obligation, even though he did not respond. Amen. For denying the claim after the plaintiff administered the oath is equivalent to responding Amen. Right. So previously we said, a person takes an oath, or they said Amen to an oath. It's like you took an oath. Over here, you didn't even have to say Amen. If you still continue to deny the claim the plaintiff is making, right, and the defendant is denying, even if he didn't say Amen to the oath that the plaintiff took. The plaintiff took an oath, right? Reuben took an oath that Shimon owes me money. And he didn't answer Amen to his oath, but he still is denying the claim. That's considered, then you've transgressed afterwards, and you found out that you're a liar, right? And you lied. So then you have transgressed the commandment of Shuas HaPikadon, of the oath of an entrusted object. This does not apply when the plaintiff lodges a claim, which, if acknowledged by the defendant, if he would admit that it is true, would not require him to make payment. So that's only if you have to make payment. In other words, I entrusted with you my silver goblet, or I lent you $100, right? So you would have to make payment if you admitted of returning the object, the goblet, or returning the money, right? But if he lodged a claim concerning a knas, which is a fine, a penalty, right? For a person is not required to pay a knas based on their own admission, that only the time that you pay a penalty is if you don't admit. But if you do admit wrongdoing, you don't pay the penalty, right? Such as a person denied an obligation is exempt from the shvus become, but it's liable for shvus bitui. right? So he wouldn't be transgressing then the pikodim, because pikodim means an entrusted object that belongs to somebody. But a penalty doesn't belong to somebody. That's an additional law that Torah or the rabbis put upon the individual. But it's not an entrusted object, right? It's not like the silver goblet or the money that was lent to the person. That's an entrusted object. A penalty is not an entrusted object. It's just a penalty. So then it would not, but you would be transgressing an oath of expression. Shuas bitui. That's what it would be, making a distinction here. Similarly, if the plaintiff lodged a claim concerning landed property, a servant or promissory note, the defendant denied the claim and took an oath, he is exempt from shuas bikodim, but liable for shuas bitui, for it's a false oath. So again, the same idea. It's a little different though, because now it is something that it does belong to the plaintiff, right? The plaintiff is lodging. You have land of mine, right? That you have land of mine that you have to return, or a servant. A servant is not considered a movable object. It's considered like landed property. It's not like a goblet because it's a person. So it's not doesn't have the same, or a promissory note that has no inherent value in the note itself. So it's not an object of value. It's just what it says. It refers to a value, right? So it's a proof. It is a proof that someone owes money, right? And now the defendant denied it, and he took an oath, but he's exempt from liability, and he lied. He lied, right? So, but he's exempt from the vow of the entrusted object because it's not an entrusted object. It's not an object. Landed property is not called an object, a movable object. That's what an object that means movable. So property is not servant, and the promissory note, because it's not an object of value, inherent value. It just has proof of that someone owes, but that the thing itself is only a piece of paper that's worth, it's worth a penny. Why is one who took the oath concerning such claims exempt from the obligation of the shuas bikodim? Behold, where we have to acknowledge, where we have acknowledged his obligation, he would have been held liable and required to pay what he has denied. It's a good question, right? In other words, if Shimon were to admit that he owes the silver goblet, what would happen? He would have to give the silver goblet back, right? If he were to admit that he owes $100, he'd have to give $100. Now here, if he were to admit that that the land belongs to Reuven, what would he have to do? He'd have to give the land, right? He'd have to give the servant. So it amounts to the same thing. You are right. You're liable to pay. So then why would you be exempt from that oath, that liability of that oath, right? So it says, concerning entrusted object, the verse says, a financial deposit, a robbery, he oppresses calling and discovered a lost object. All of this concerns movable property, which if he would admit his liability, he would have to make financial restitution from his own domain. So the oath of a pikadon is only for movable property, because the verse says that. So therefore, it's not in that category. This includes landed property, for it's not movable property. For landed property is always revealed before its owner. It's always in their possession. So like Shimon could hide the silver goblet, but he can't he can't hide the property. See, the property is always there, openly, revealed before its owner. And the fact is, for example, the silver goblet, right? It's not in Reuven's possession right now because it was entrusted. So how can he prove that it's his? He doesn't have possession of it. It's only because he's making a claim in court, right? Is that clear? Movable property is always there before him, and he can always, it's always in his possession. It's not in his possession, right? Similarly, it excludes servants for the equation is established between servants and landed property. And it excludes promissory note for the actual substance is not of financial value. Okay. Clear? So for immovable, what happens? Landed property is not hidden, right? I understood that. Right. So a servant is considered like landed property. It's not considered like movable property, even though a servant has two legs and is movable. But the law of a servant is like landed property. And we learned that there. That's learned out from a verse. We learned that out. Right. Now, the promissory note is also included because it has no inherent value to it. The silver goblet has inherent value to it, right? Money has inherent value to it, right? But a piece of paper that says that you owe $1,000, the piece of paper has no inherent value, just what's written on there. So therefore, it's not considered movable property that has inherent value, and therefore it would not be under the law of Shuos HaPikadon of a oath of a movable property. Okay. Number 5, the above laws apply whether one took an oath after the plaintiff lodged a claim against him, or whether he took it on his own initiative, even though a claim was not lodged against him. What is implied? So let's see. He took the initiative and said, "Why are you following me? Do I have?" And others, the defendant took the initiative here, right? Do I have money belonging to you? I'm taking an oath that I'm not in possession of any of your money. Since he denied an obligation and took an oath, he is liable even though the plaintiff did not lodge a claim against him. Others, to be liable for the other two kinds of oaths that we spoke about before that are of an expression, like someone will say, "I'm not going to drink coffee today," right? I take an oath, and you do it in God's name or with or you say the Holy One, in the name of the Holy One, blessed be He. That I'm not gonna, right? So that's something just you did. It doesn't take into consideration another person, right? Or you took an oath, that's shuas bitui, that's a self-expression one, right? Or you took an oath that's called in vain. It's also you. Like, I am going to jump to the moon. I take an oath in the name of God, da 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 da, right? And then you say, the person would say that I'm going to jump to the moon. That's an oath in vain because you can't do that, right? You can't do that. So that's taking an oath in vain. This over here, though, is about an entrusted object. Well, entrusted by another party means that the whole oath that was taken is because there's another party, a plaintiff involved. But what happens if Reuven is following Shimon, right? And Shimon turns around and he says, "Well, what are you? You're following me? Why? Because I owe you something? I'm taking an oath right now. I don't owe you anything." There's no plaintiff there. He took an oath, right, on his own. Yet we call that still, even though he didn't lodge a claim against him, it's still called Shuos HaPikadon. It's still under this guise, right? Again, we're giving the unique parameters to the law. Fascinating. One is liable whether he took the oath, whether he took an oath to the person to whom he owes the money or to his agent who was given the power of attorney for the person's agent is equivalent to his own self. 7, one is liable for a Shuos HaPikadon unless he requires him to take an oath in a language that he understands. It's not liable, sorry. person is not liable to take this oath unless he requires him to take an oath in language that he understands. For an oath can be taken in any language, derives from the, okay. Okay. I have to stop here, folks. Amazing.
Thank you.
Talk. Don't forget.
Thank you,
Yes.
Rabbi.
God
Thank
bless
you.
you.